Welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm Kim, your host, and I'm so happy to be with you. If you're returning to the podcast, I'm grateful for you. Thank you for being here. Let's talk about managing triggers, food, and family and friends around the holidays. If you're not watching this or listening to this during the holidays, it's okay because we can be triggered at any time by things that people say. And when people say comments to us, we can react by being defensive. We can react with our own comments. We can react harshly. We can react by eating food, turning to alcohol. Whatever way that we react, we want to change this into a more peaceful, less tense situation. So I really want to share that I understand there are so many emotional and psychological challenges around big events, around family events, around holidays, around even getting together with a bunch of friends, or even getting together with someone you haven't seen for a long time that knows you from when you were younger. There are so many different ways that we can be triggered by comments that people say. And what happens is we will turn to the easiest thing, which is food, to help us soothe those feelings. And sometimes in these events, there are comments that are made around the food that we eat, the type of eater we are, our weight, or any past behaviors. And that can open up old wounds that are they're pretty deep and we haven't really healed them with ourselves. So it can create a lot of tension. And again, then we react. And I want to just give you a little disclaimer. The information in this podcast is not to take the place of your mental health practitioner, your medical practitioner, or anyone else that you have in your life to help you with any of the issues that you're dealing with emotionally, mentally, or physically. I'm here to just give you some information and some ideas to help you move forward in peace. So, what are triggers? Triggers can be anything that's happening in a conversation. It could be something that you even bring up from the past in your own mind. I'll give you a silly example. When I was in high school, I sang in front of someone and they started laughing. Now, I know I don't have a good singing voice, but I've never forgotten that. And I do not sing in front of people. So it's really funny. I haven't even done karaoke before. I'm 58 years old. I have not done karaoke because of that. Even though karaoke, you can actually sing badly and it's okay because it's still fun. And I realize that now, but I am triggered by those thoughts, which leads me to other things that could be triggering. Because if you grew up in a household where there were very high expectations, or you always needed to do things to be loved or to be liked, or maybe you were always people pleasing, those expectations could still be with you. You could be triggered to want to be liked by people. You could be triggered to want to say the right thing or to always be on point and not disappoint people. Those are triggers also. It's not just things that people say, but the part of you inside that goes back to being that younger person, that younger girl wants to respond to make everything okay. And we'll talk about how to respond and some ideas that maybe you can incorporate into your conversations if you feel triggered and you want to respond either in a peaceful way or to set boundaries. So there are comments that are made. I have clients who have told me these actual comments where a family member might say, "Are you going to eat that?" Or "I thought you were on a diet," or "I thought you were trying to lose weight." That's very triggering, especially if you're trying to take care of your health and be empowered with your health, and you have a family member who is micromanaging what you're putting into your mouth and you can't even enjoy the meal. Especially when we talk about food, many of my clients call food either good or bad. And when they call food good or bad, they call themselves good or bad. And there's no morality on food, but society has really set us up to feel that way. And for some reason, we also feel like a traditional meal at the holidays, instead of being fun, instead of us being able to enjoy it, the meal has now become bad food, and everyone talks about, I'm just going to go crazy during the holidays and then I'll start over in the new year. So we have put a label on food that can also be triggering during the holidays, but then someone is making comments about you eating it, and that can be embarrassing, and that can trigger shame, that can trigger that guilt. Here's another one that one of my clients told me recently, where someone actually said out loud, and hopefully this isn't happening. I hope people are more sensitive, but it does happen because when someone's close to you, they feel like they can say anything. You've gained weight since I last saw you. And when someone says you've lost weight since I last saw you, that is also a comment on your body that can make you feel very self-conscious. When we walk around telling people they've lost weight, we don't always know the story. We don't know how hard it was for them to get there. We don't know if they were going through a life event like a divorce. We don't know the whole story, but it highlights it. So let's say you even wanted to lose weight. If somebody mentions that to you, then it means that they are paying very close attention to your body. It could be a compliment or it may not be a compliment. So in addition to you understanding things that trigger you, and I want to take care of you as my listener, I also want you to be aware of how you're talking to other people about their bodies, because we don't know the whole story. And if someone says to you, even if you bring it up, oh yeah, I was a little heavier, I've lost some weight, and they say, yeah, you've lost some weight, it can be very triggering, and it can make you feel scared to gain that weight back again. So those are some real triggers that I've heard recently right here in my office. Another trigger is, remember when we used to be skinny? Even if someone's including themselves, it can be triggering that your body has changed over time. And if you listen to a couple episodes ago, the Body Image Inside Out, episode 84, was so amazing with Deb Schachter. We talked about what happens when you're grieving your younger body. And that is such a full, wonderful episode that I'd love for you to go back and listen to if these are comments that are triggering for you. So those are the type of things that are triggers. And when I say triggers, they elicit just an awful feeling inside, something that just rises up, that is really spiky for you, that feels raw and doesn't feel good. So how is this connected to food, though, is we activate these feelings of shame over our bodies. We activate feelings of shame over our behavior with food, wishing that we had done better. We activate these feelings of inadequacy, like I'm not good enough if I'm not skinny, or I'm not good enough if my body doesn't look a certain way. I'm not good enough if I can't turn down certain food. And then we also use food as a coping mechanism. So many times we just say, well, I'm just going to eat whatever I want, because not because we love the food and it's Christmas or it's holiday or it's a celebration or it's a date, but I'm just going to eat this food because I give up. I give up. If people are saying that about me, I'm just going to use food. We don't consciously say we're going to use food to cope, but food is amazing, and it's one of those things that makes us feel better temporarily. And there is a place for all food. So let's talk about the voices from the past. So we have these critical voices in our head from when we were a child, and it may not be from your parents, but it could even be from a teacher or a coach or even a friend. Any criticism that we hang on to throughout our lives, like me hanging on to being laughed at for singing, but I've also hang on to the comments that people have made even in my early 20s. I was actually 19 years old, and I've shared this story before, but I remember a boyfriend saying to me, and actually not saying to me, broke up with me. And then his friends told me that he made a comment like, yeah, my old girlfriend had a better body than Kim. And it's funny because you would think at 19, oh, that's, whatever, that's not a big deal. And at 58, I should not be thinking about that comment. But that comment was at a time in my life when I did not feel good about my body. I had gone to college. I had gained weight for the first time in my life. I didn't even understand what was happening. I was eating different food. I was drinking and I was not having good, healthy habits. So, all of it combined, I had a lot of shame and I had a lot of guilt. And then after that comment, returning home and having family members make comments behind my back that I found out about later too. So it creates this shame and guilt. So that can be triggering, and things can be said today at my current age, but I'm triggered back to those times when there was criticism around my body. So I'm just sharing that as an example because voices from the past are real. However, they're not real today. What is your story today? And we'll get into that. Because when you are at a holiday party, when you're at a holiday gathering, when you're with family, when you're with friends, and people are just being who they are, making those comments, how can you protect yourself so you don't feel resentful or shame or guilt? How can you protect your inner being and feel bubble wrapped against some of the comments? Because today you are who you are and you're amazing and you are perfect the way you are. You are welcome to work on anything that you want to with your body, your mind, your heart, but you are perfect as you are. And progress is okay and you can improve, but you don't have to be hanging on to the old comment that you're not good enough. You're good enough as you are. So let's talk about building that resilience and understanding your power in these conversations, because you have the power. And once you recognize that you have the power, even if they're saying those things, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. So you have the power. Let's focus on self-awareness first. One of the things that I would love for everyone to do, and I laugh when I say this, is journal. Why do I laugh when I say I'd love for everyone to journal? Is because I could not stand journaling. I had such a hard time sitting down and journaling. And in episode 83, I believe it is, with the Functional Moms podcast, Raquel brought to my attention that we overthink journaling. Instead of just writing down our feelings, just writing down what's going on, just writing a few words and just seeing where it goes, we get really complicated with it. And we think it should be something more. And she also suggested carrying your journal with you. And I do bring my journal with me because I realize I get triggered all over the place in many different places, not just at home at night when I have time to journal. And sometimes I realize when I start writing down words that it's connecting to something so much deeper. And there may be a fear underlying everything. There might be a resentment underlying everything. And then I can start working through it through other methods that I'll share with you. So write down those triggering comments, write down what is making you feel bad about those comments. And what's the truth today? And it's funny because when I write down those comments, so let's go back to the old boyfriend at 19 years old saying, my girlfriend before Kim had a better body. Well, now when I write that out, I can actually laugh about it. And because that's so shallow. And that's at 19 years old, of course, that's all he was thinking about. So I think that's actually really funny now. If I write down something now that's triggering when someone says something, I actually have to dig a little bit deeper because it's not always so obvious. And I had a client write down a comment because she was snapped at work and wrote down the comment and wrote down the feelings. And all of a sudden, as she was writing, she remembered her dad snapping at her in the same way and having some very unrealistic expectations. And that is so powerful because today she's not that little girl, but she can address that little girl and say, it's okay, you're fine. You don't need to be spoken to like that. And you don't even need to react, but you can set up boundaries that are easy. You can set up boundaries that are verbal, And you can actually say what those boundaries are, or just set up boundaries for yourself to not be around that toxic person. And I thought that was really powerful, and that all came out of journaling. So the other thing I'd love for you to do is reframe your situation. Reframe what's going on when someone's making a comment to you. So identify the thought. So if someone says something to you about your body, about your eating, if you're feeling like you're not good enough, to reframe that thought and remember that you are. You make that decision that you are good enough. You make that decision that you are completely enough at any given time. You are enough at any given time. You're also doing the best you can at any given time. So we use these affirmations, and sometimes I think we don't really believe the affirmations. What we can believe is the thought that at any given time, I'm okay, and I don't have to rely on other people's thoughts to decide who and what I am. Even if you don't really fully know who you are or what you stand for yet, as you're working through that, it doesn't have to be what other people think. And then challenge it and say in your mind, if you want to say it to them, that's fine. But sometimes that can create more conflict sometimes. You can challenge it and say, you know what, that is their opinion, not my reality. So I'm going to say that again. That is their opinion, not my reality. Challenge what other people may say to you that triggers you, and remember what your true reality is. And does their opinion count? I remember hearing a saying that I thought was really interesting. What other people think about me is not my business. And it's true, because we can't control it. It's none of our business. It's really what we think about ourselves. And when you look at really confident people who own their thoughts, they own their what they speak about, they own how they carry themselves, it's really interesting to me. And they claim to not worry about what other people think. I think that's very powerful. And I think that's very hard, because we grow up being taught as women, we need to worry about what people think. We need to care for others. We need to take care of others. We need to always be taking care of what other people are going through. But you are important too, and you are enough. I'd love for you also to replace that feeling of less than with I'm worthy just as I am, and I don't need other people's validation. We are living in a world of really needing everybody else's validation. Online, we need likes and we need follows and we need people to give us accolades, and we need that validation. And I want to share with you, as I have been progressing in this podcast, I've been sharing more and more about my faith and trying to understand how to be more aware of God's approval and worthiness through Him, and not through people and not through the world. And that's a really challenging place to be, because look at all of us. We are online all the time. There's comparison-itis. Then we have people making comments because they're online also. And when we are outside of that conversation with God and we're in the world, we sometimes forget that we don't need other people's approval. That if you feel good about yourself and you have your values and you have things that you really stand for, that you can stand in that if you are being the person that authentically that you want to be. Practice boundary setting. I've brought this up in other episodes, but this is so important, I'm going to bring it up again. When people hurt your feelings, when people make comments that are out of line, it's really helpful to practice boundary setting if you feel like you can. And one of the things that I have had to say to some people is, I'm not comfortable with you talking about my eating habits. And I'm not comfortable with you talking about my body, even if you're complimenting it. And I'm very aware of that with my kids too. I want to talk about how strong they are And I love when they are trying new things. And I was really excited. My daughter, Alex, who has been in one of the episodes on the podcast, is in her 20s and she is just starting to take yoga. And I'm so excited for her, not because I want her to get in shape or I want her to have a certain body, because it's an experience that she's really enjoying and it's helping her connect with herself and her body. So just remembering that you can set boundaries on people and let them know that it's not comfortable. But what's really interesting about setting boundaries is sometimes that can be uncomfortable. And you have to explore why it's uncomfortable for you to speak up for yourself. There might have been a trigger from when you were younger saying you are not allowed to voice your needs. It was not about you. And someone might have made you feel selfish if you were voicing your needs, when in reality, voicing our needs really helps communicate to everyone. Setting those boundaries helps everyone so they know where they stand with you and there isn't that tension. And you can also understand, if you go back to some of the episodes I've done before about voicing your needs, that boundaries are really an act of self-care. It's really taking care of everyone, and it's not just about being selfish and putting a line in the sand. I believe it was Brene Brown that said boundaries are like having a fence with someone, but sharing with the right people where the door is. And I know I probably butchered that, but I thought that was really powerful. Okay, this is a tip that's very challenging and it takes so much practice. But letting others be themselves, you can't control what other people think, and you certainly can't control what comes out of their mouth many times or their behaviors. But you know what? You are strong and powerful and you can control your reaction. This takes a lot. This takes a lot of practice to allow people just to be who they are. And as we are all getting older and parents are getting older, people in your family, you're starting to realize that people aren't going to be able to just change on a dime. They aren't going to be able to just do what everyone else wants them to do, and allowing them to be who they are gives you peace. This isn't for them. This is for you. This is for you to have peace. So allowing someone to be who they are and just taking a breather, walking out of the room when you need to, taking a breath and just saying it's okay. They're going to say it has no reflection on me, has nothing to do with me. It's just something they would have said anyway. That is, I think, one of the most challenging ones. Mel Robbins just put out that book, Let Them, and it's really important to let people be who they are. We really can work on ourselves and find so much more peace without the battle. And like I said, I understand. Trust me. I know it takes practice. I'm always working on it. Focusing on creating that peace within yourself rather than engaging in conflict is so important, because you're never going to get away from it. You're always going to hear something, and it may not be necessarily directed at you, but you're always going to be triggered. You may be triggered in stress. You may be triggered in work, not just at family events or around the holidays, but always working on that piece. And so with that, let's talk about some really practical tactics that I would employ if I was going to a gathering that I might think is going to be stressful. So before I go to a gathering that I might consider something that is stressful, and it may not just be because of comments or triggers, it might be a socially anxious moment for me, because maybe it's even people that I don't spend a lot of time with, or I just know is going to be a little socially awkward. You can practice some mindfulness and do some tapping. You know that I love doing tapping. And if you ever need a little help getting started on that, make sure that you send me a note in Instagram and we'll talk about how to help you get started on tapping. It's emotional freedom technique. And if you are watching the video, it's using these acupressure points that really help us to really break in with this energy and find out where our blockages are, and it helps us release the tension and release the stress around whatever we're going through. And we use a script, but it's not a script where you have to know what to say. So that's why I'd love to help you get started on that. And remind yourself before you go anywhere what your values are and who you are today, and the peace that you want to exude when you go to that gathering. The funny thing is, I'll start with the peace and I'll feel so good. And as soon as I walk in the room, I start to crumble. So sometimes we have to take a little break, run to the bathroom, and it's like reloading. We have to fill back up with all that peace and come back out again and work through it. During the gathering, just staying really present. When you let your mind go to the past or you go to the future thinking you're going to predict something that someone's going to say, that can be very dangerous and triggering. Just stay where you are in the moment, really stay focused and focus on yourself and having that peace. And I think this is one of the hardest things, is to not speak back too quickly, because that can start the conflict that is not worth it. We can never win when we are triggered, and we don't really want to win. We just want a peaceful situation, but we feel like we have to win. Somebody's got to be right, and they may be absolutely out of line with their comment, but we don't have to share that we are right. We just can get through the moment. And I think being really focused on being present and non reactive, we can politely change the subject or use our boundary phrase. After the gathering, journal those thoughts, any shame, any guilt, and really look at the reality, though, and look at where you are today and how strong you are and resilient you are today. And be thankful that you're not that person making those comments. I think working on this is so powerful. It's made me such a more aware person of the things that I might say to people. And I want to be very kind, and I want to be very open, and I want to be very loving. So it's helped me working on myself when I'm triggered, so that I am hopefully not triggering other people. But here's the really important thing. Even things you say in kindness can trigger someone. And you have to understand that if you are saying everything out of the kindness of your heart and still having good intention, we still can hurt people. And it's okay to just say, I'm sorry. That was not my intention. And we don't want to even over explain things, because people are triggered. Everyone has come from a past. Everyone has something going on. And understanding that everyone has a story helps us deal with them easier also. So creating that sense of peace is just making sure you have that self-care. You have to have rest, hydration. When you're going to these events, please eat. Don't save up your calories, because you're just going to be hangry and you're not going to feel good. Make sure you're having some relaxation, rest, and sleep before you go to these things. Fatigue will also lead us to not only being triggered, but all of this conversation is around also leaning into the food, because sometimes we'll come home and we'll eat even more because we are so triggered, and food is such that dopamine hit. Emotional eating is really when we're eating food and the first few bites are amazing and they give us that dopamine hit and they give us that feel good temporarily, but we just keep eating because we want that feeling. But we're not really getting what we got out of the first few bites, and it's just mindless eating and we're not really enjoying it. We're just dealing with those triggers and feeling better about ourselves. And I think doing meditation and breathing, stretching, anything that makes you feel good when you get home to release some of that physically also. Tapping again is wonderful. I also love the idea of walking and exercising. That really helps us through some of these events also. Tap into your values. What are your values? What really matters to you? What part of you can you honor? I want you to let go of external expectations if possible. Really embrace yourself when you go to these things. It's so important to be able to be ourselves. That's a trigger in itself when we feel like we have to go into our shell and we can't be who we are, because when somebody at an event says something to you that makes you feel like, "Ooh, I can't say what I really think. I can't voice my real needs. I can't be who I am. That can be very triggering, and that can lead to emotional eating also. So when you can let go of what other people expect and be okay with it and be you, that's amazing, and not feel guilty for being who you are and voicing your own opinions. And I think focusing on gratitude for being with these people and the connection and knowing. So, here's an example. I have a client who has very elderly parents and is learning to let go of a lot of those comments, right or wrong, just because she knows her time is limited, and feeling very grateful for the time together, and then just having to do all of these techniques in order to let go, have peace, and then everybody walks away thinking that things went well. And I'm not saying to hide those feelings. I'm not saying to act like nothing's going on, because I know some of you are thinking, no, I'm going to say something and I have to stand up for myself. And if that's your best way of dealing with it, it makes you feel the best, and you won't be emotional eating or digging into the wine because of those feelings, then you do what works for you. Everyone's different. And if that makes you feel better, and the reason why I bring up the techniques that I'm bringing up today is sometimes that will create more conflict and possibly some fighting within the group. It's amazing, as I close this out, how much grace has helped me deal in so many situations, giving people grace. And again, going back to my faith, grace is one of the biggest things that I want to give others, because I want someone to give that to me the way God has given me grace. So treating yourself with kindness while treating others with kindness, understanding they come from somewhere too, and reminding yourself also when you're having these holiday meals, one meal is only, out of 21 meals in a week, is only a little over 4% of your entire week. Enjoy that meal, enjoy that food, and know that you can work on this anytime you want. But that is your connection time. If you choose to enjoy it without shame and without guilt. And the bigger picture is food's not your enemy. Food is really there for nourishment. We love it. It's a way of connecting with people. And we know that there's a lot of emotional triggers around it, but we can work through those. We can work through those, and knowing that food can be a lot of things, but it doesn't have to be your stress relieving technique. It doesn't have to be your coping mechanism. It can be something you just really enjoy and makes your body feel really good and helps you have a very long, healthy life. So let's talk about hope. There's hope. And I think the hope really is with you, not worrying about what other people are going to do and if they're going to change, just knowing that you can, and that you are enough, and you are worthy of feeling really good about yourself and your body, no matter where you are in the transition. If you are working on it, and if you're happy where you are, that's great too. I'm happy for you. You have the power to own your thoughts, own your life, and to have peace. And I wish that for you during this season. I wish you so much peace during the holiday season. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. So please make sure you give me a comment and you reach out. And if I can help you in any way with your emotional eating journey, then I would love to help you. And thank you so much for listening. Happy holidays.